All right, so our level's still good? People in the back? Good? All right, great. So anyway, thanks for coming. More people than I thought we might get. I was a little nervous with the Sunday morning at 11 time slot, but this is great. So my name's Paul Moore. I do SELinux kernel stuff, audit kernel stuff, libseccomp, a few other random things, but today we're going to be talking about SELinux and modularity. And how many of you made it to Langdon's talk on Friday morning where he talked about modularity? Hands. Okay, not a whole lot. So we're going to talk a little bit about modularity, but before we start on this, I just want to make a quick note. For those of you that maybe don't follow modularity, there was a little shift, a little change in modularity about a month ago. And that was after I had submitted the abstract for this talk. So the talk changed a little bit after the abstract. So instead of maybe going into a whole lot of depth about what the SELinux Modularity project is, I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm going to give you kind of the history of SELinux and kind of a little bit of a history in Linux in general to kind of help you explain where SELinux Modularity and where modularity comes from, why we decided to do SELinux Modularity, how things maybe have changed within the past month, and what that means for us and what we think things are going to look like in the future. It's a lot for 23 minutes, but we'll get through as quickly as we can. So anyway, I'm going to gloss over a lot of things pretty quickly, but if you have any questions, I'm here all day today. You can find me in the hallways. You can find me after the talk. So anyway, let's get started. Now let's start at the beginning. So in the beginning, everything was big, monolithic. Linux had no idea of virtual machines. I know, it was terrible. There's no containers. That scares probably all of you in the room. That actually makes me kind of happy. I look back at those as the good old days. Distribution packages were how you built your system. Sure, you might have a few things stashed in user local, but if you veered too far away from what the distribution provided, it got real messy real quick. It wasn't pretty. And we delivered SELinux policy, all of the SELinux policy as one single package on your machine, much like we still do today. But anyway, life was very simple back then. The worst Intel processor bug we had to deal with was occasionally it would mess up a floating point operation in your spreadsheet, once every million times. But that was the worst thing we had to deal with. However, as the quote says, not everyone was really happy about that. So things started changing. The world started to become virtual, right? We started off with hardware virtualization. First we had Zen, and that was kind of neat. Then we had KVM, and that was really neat. Then we started virtualizing the kernel. We had namespaces, and did anybody go to Dan's talk? Dan Walsh? Okay, so you know about the D word and the swear jar? Okay. So anyway, for those of you that didn't, I can't even begin to do Dan's talk justice, so find it on YouTube. It's well worth an hour of your time. I think you can figure out what the D word is. And we also have data center virtualization, right? And this is really when we start talking about things like, the cloud and Amazon and whatnot. So all sorts of virtualization. That's kind of been the big thing over the past, 5, 10 years, whatnot. But another thing that I think we often forget about, but I think is equally important when we start talking about things like SELinux and modularity, is that we started getting beyond the idea of where you get all your software from your distribution. We have third-party RPM repositories. I think everybody knows what EPEL is, right? Apple? You mean Apple? Yeah, exactly. Totally the same thing. But yeah, and we've got, like Python's got pip. We've even got, really before containers got started, there were some people that, distributed software through VM images. And obviously we have container registries now. We also have what I classify under the various other terrible ideas. I've seen a lot of really weird ways of distributing software. Unfortunately, the worst thing I've ever seen, though, is all these instructions where they tell you to basically pipe the output of wget into sudo. So I think, if I have a swear jar, basically, if you have ever piped the output of wget into sudo, we're not talking coins. I want you to take your whole wallet and put it in that swear jar. And walk away from your terminal. Just don't ever touch a computer again. Perhaps the worst thing you can ever do. Trust me on this one.
Apple used to ask you to do that.
A lot of places used to ask you to do that. And just because we do that doesn't mean I think it's a good idea. So, is what? Yeah, curl's okay. Curl's totally cool. It's just, the problem here is wget. Everything else is fine. It's totally wget's problem. Yeah. So anyway, so the world was changing. And if we didn't make some changes too, we were going to have some problems. And we were going to have some problems very quickly. So if any of you were at Flock, 2 years ago? Or last year? Okay. They started talking about Fedora modularity. And this is a really cool idea. And once again, I don't have time today to even scratch the surface of it. But there's a lot of good information online. I'm going to have some links to show you at the end. But honestly, if you just Google Fedora modularity, that'll send you in the right spot. But the way I like to think of Fedora modularity is get away from thinking about individual packages and applications and start thinking about use cases. So for example, I think almost everybody in the room here is probably a developer. Is that a safe assumption? Can't be asleep yet. Come on. So anyway, so instead of thank you. So instead of thinking about, like when you install a new Fedora system, you probably think, okay, well, I need to install probably, make, Git, GCC, my editor, web browser so I can find the map to the nearest pub because my code isn't going to work. So stuff like that. So instead of, installing all those individual applications, you can just go ahead and say, I'm going to install my developer module. And you just do the one thing and it installs everything on your system. And in some ways, it's kind of like RPM package groups, sort of. But that's not really doing modules justice. It's more to it than just that. But that's a good way to conceptualize it right now. But yeah, there's a big new emphasis on testing these things together to make sure they all work. You can even start customizing things. You can tailor it so that, for example, you could install a WordPress module that would install Apache, WordPress, all the other various things, and it would configure Apache for you, so you wouldn't have to mess around with those wonderful Apache configuration files. My apologies if there's any Apache developers in the room. You can also pick different release streams. So you can say, okay, I want the older version of WordPress, but it's been tested a bit longer, it's a little more stable. Or I can take the more up-to-date, more current, more faster, more fun version that's probably broken. So anyway, and there was also some planned support for different packaging formats, so not just RPMs. I don't know if that's still in plan or not. I'm seeing a blank face, so maybe.
There is nothing in the modularity specification that prevents it, but it is not actively being worked on.
It's my presentation, so I'm going to say it's planned. If you find out it's not, you can tell the modularity guys that I told you it was planned. So anyway, SELinux was starting to evolve too with this, kind of independently from modularity. We decided that, okay, this monolithic policy was just brutal to develop. So we kind of decomposed that into modules. We introduced some proper, programming good practices. We had some structure to it. We provided some well-defined interfaces between the modules to help document how they interact and define some abstractions. And we made these modules visible on the system level. It wasn't just a developer nicety. You could actually load and unload individual SELinux modules on your system. Hopefully I'm not telling you these things for the first time, but if I am, there's other SELinux talks today. Lukasz, raise your hand. What time's your talk today?
4:30.
Okay, go to Lukasz's talk. Lukasz is our main SELinux policy developer here at Red Hat and Fedora, and he's going to give a really good talk this afternoon. So he can fill you in on some of these things, which I'm just going to gloss over. We also had a prioritized policy module database, which probably only about 4 of you in this whole room care about. But it's really cool because it allows basically you to have your distribution policy with Fedora, and you can have your own customized policies or your third-party policies on top of it, and everything will work the way you expect it would. You know, you get an update from Fedora, and we don't blow away your own custom policy that you worked for 2 days on. So that made everybody very happy when we got that out. But like everything in the world, we're not done, right? So we decompose things into modules, but we still ship all these modules in one RPM package today. So every time you install Fedora, you get every SELinux policy module installed every time, even if you're, even if it's a headless server and you don't have Firefox on there, you're getting a Firefox policy. Not a terrible thing, but it's wasteful of resources, has a few other issues, so we want to try and get away from that. We were talking a little bit about this before you guys came in. Policy and application development remains disconnected. And I think if any of you have ever run into an SELinux problem when you've upgraded an application, you know what I'm talking about. The way it works right now is we have application developers sitting over here, and we have SELinux policy developers sitting over here. And about the only time they ever talk is when the application developer introduces new functionality. Everybody upgrades that application. It's like, hey, this is great. It breaks because SELinux doesn't know about this new functionality. Everybody files Bugzillas, and the poor SELinux policy team says, screw this, we're going to the pub. So basically, we want to find a way to get application development and policy development a little closer together so that when the application developers introduce a new functionality, we can have the policy ready at the same time so that you can go out, you can upgrade your system, you can put on that new version of Firefox or Chrome, and it'll just work. And the last point, a little more of a people issue, not so much a technical issue. There's a lot of application developers in the world. There's not quite as many SELinux policy developers. You obviously all know Dan, Mr. SELinux. And you also know that Dan ran away to join the container circus. There's Miroslav. Raise your hand. Everybody know? Hopefully everybody knows Miroslav. Miroslav took over from Dan when Dan left, and Miroslav did a great job for a couple of years. But then he decided that management was more appealing, which that should tell you how difficult of a job it is, right? We're losing engineers to managers. So now we've got Lukasz. He's been doing it for, what, 2 or 3 years now? 4 years, see, yeah. So, which makes me even more nervous. He's been doing this for 4 years, so at some point he too is going to go crazy. I don't know, they're going to lock him up in the Ansible tower or something. Something's going to happen. So we got to do a better job. So divide and conquer. It's worked really well for Julius Caesar until his coworkers stabbed him. But SELinux Modularity, and I've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to start going a little quickly. Basically, the idea is we take all of our policy modules for the high-level applications, like Firefox, Apache. We split those out. Okay, we package them in different RPMs, so we're no longer shipping everything as one big RPM. We take those RPMs, we include them with the applications in the modules. So if you have a module that ships Apache, we're going to ship the SELinux policy for Apache with it. That way, when we're testing the module, when the application developer or the packager puts in a new version of Apache, they also see, hey, there's some SELinux policy in here too. Maybe I should go talk to the policy guys and make sure this all works. And we're going to be building on top of the Fedora Independent Policy Project, which I'm pretty sure is a new concept for almost everybody in this room. Another reason to go to Lukasz's talk. This is something that have we announced this yet anywhere? Sorry? Have we announced the Independent Policy Project anywhere? Not yet. Okay.
Some applications are already using it.
Yeah. So we've had a soft open, if you will. But you're going to hear more about this in the future. Basically, it's documentation, it's tooling, it's information on where to go for help so that you as application developers, as packagers, even just people that want to get involved, if you think SELinux is cool, these are going to be a good resource for you to get involved, help out with some writing, some policy, keeping things in better shape. So this is really, I'm really excited about this. This is good stuff. Was good stuff. As I said, about a month ago, things changed a bit. And Stephen Gallagher wrote a very good article, actually, on the Fedora blog, and I've got a link to it later, explaining, that there's some changes, there's been some lessons learned, and that Fedora modularity, it was originally envisioned, wasn't really practical. But a lot of the core concepts are still good concepts, and they're still important, and they're going to be part of Fedora moving forward. Just kind of have to maybe change how we get there, and maybe not do it all at once, but kind of spread it out over time. Is that a fair summary? Okay. So anyway, I really encourage you to read this article. It's not very long, 20 minutes. It's good. So what does this mean for SELinux modularity? Well, much like Fedora modularity, the concepts are still good, right? The benefits are still there, and these are all still things we want to do. But perhaps what happens is some of the urgency behind it goes away. We were thinking that Fedora 27 was potentially going to be fully modular. Well, it's not now. But that's okay. There are still going to be a number of modules in Fedora 27, and I expect with Fedora 28 there's going to be more, and Fedora 29 there's going to be even more. So in some ways this takes some of the pressure off us and the rest of the Fedora developers. It allows us to make sure we're doing this well, and we're doing this at a measured pace. So SELinux modularity is definitely not dead. All the excitement and all the awesomeness that we were originally planning, we're still going to have. It's just not all going to be there in the beginning. So, and with that, I just really like this quote. I tried to find a way to shoehorn it in there somewhere. And then this is the links page. So please take a photo of it. I'll put this up on my blog when I get a spare moment. And you can always send me email or tweet, and I'd be happy to send you slides. Or I'll send you a pointer afterwards. Do we have a minute or 2 minutes left? 30 seconds. Quick questions. How am I? Oh, I haven't fallen asleep, so that's not too bad. Oh, okay. So I thought I had 30 seconds. So all right. So we can probably take one more question then. Nothing? Yes.
That would be cool addition to the whole splitting the modules and policies.
So I could rant to you for about 5 or 6 hours on SELinux namespaces, what's good about that and what's bad about that. And this is currently something we're discussing upstream. I don't know, SELinux namespace is also a loaded term because that could mean 3 or 4 different things. So we can definitely talk more about this outside. All I'll say for right now is it's something we're considering, but I can't give you a good answer in 5 minutes. So
one of the things that modularity brings, as you mentioned, was different versions of software. Some of them running old stable froggy versions, some of them running new hotness that all the crazy JavaScript kids care about. So what I'm a little bit concerned about is how easy is it going to be to develop policy, because it's going to become much more important that application developers and packagers start shipping that policy. So what are we doing to make it easier for people to actually build it?
brave new world of SELinux policy development. Yeah, and this is why we have the independent policy project. To be honest with you, the SELinux modularity concepts wouldn't be quite as appealing if we also didn't have this kind of renewed effort, this renewed push to try and make SELinux policy development easier and more approachable for people that don't necessarily have an SELinux policy background. And I just realized I didn't repeat either one of those questions, so I apologize. The first question was dealing with SELinux namespaces. The second question was, we're going to be including SELinux policy in with application level modules, and what are we doing to make policy development easier for those application developers or those packagers. And so that was my response with the independent policy project. The one thing I will maybe add to that question a little bit and respond with is you were talking about the different streams or versions. You could have stable versus new and exciting. Right now, it's actually kind of challenging to develop SELinux policy because we only have this one package. It's a one-size-fits-all policy. So we have to make sure that policy works for the new hotness while at the same time not completely breaking the old stable. By decomposing this and having policy packaged up with the application, that should make life a little easier because if necessary, if there is kind of, say, a flag day type change, we now have two different streams and two different packages. So it should make life easier for policy development. That's the theory anyway. Any other questions?
Yeah, so with the modularity in place, we would get RPMs for each and every package with certain policies, so double the amount of RPMs installed in the system, or would it come with the RPM of the application?
Okay, so the question was with modularity, and now that we're decomposing our single policy package up into individual RPMs, would we have an extra 50,000 RPMs on the system? And so the answer I'll provide is right now, so we have SELinux policy modules for a number of applications. If you look at the number of policy modules you have on a system and the number of applications you have on a system, huge disparity. We don't write SELinux policy for every application on the system. Like Vim, for example. That just, you run your editor in whatever your current SELinux domain is, because depending on what domain you're in, you're going to have access to different things. Trying to confine Vim or any editor for that reason is impossible, right? And it's not desirable anyway, even ignoring the challenges. So even if we were to decompose the entire SELinux policy right now, we wouldn't be adding, we wouldn't be doubling the number of packages. I mean, what do we have? A couple hundred policy modules? Modules?
Oh, sorry, modules in.
Yeah, in the SELinux policy. How many policy modules do we have?
Oh, it's a couple hundred.
Yeah, it's a couple hundred. So at worst case, we throw a couple hundred on the several thousand that exists. And in practice, I think you're going to see several policy modules still retain part of the base. We're always going to have like the SELinux policy base RPM, which gives you some foundational policies. Like there needs to be some stuff for the kernel and core utils and stuff like that. System D.
If I could interject briefly, one of the things about modules is that they are a cluster of RPMs that are meant to be together. So probably you would only do a policy module for a set of them rather than for the individual RPMs that are compressed.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry. Thank you. So, and this is last question, I'm sorry. But basically, Stephen was just commenting that because modules are bundles of RPMs, as we just talked about, might be, you'd encapsulate potentially all the SELinux policy for those individual bundled RPMs into one RPM policy package. So hopefully it won't be bad. So anyway, like I said, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope this was useful. And if you have any questions, you can always catch me in the hallway.